Good afternoon. My name is Janice Strutt. I'm with Morgan's Caring Connection, and today we are joined by Melissa Burback from Northwestern Mutual, where she's a wealth management advisor. And we are covering Social Security and Medicaid, which I got to be honest with you, is not something I'm very well versed in. And I know a lot of families really struggle with this. So I'll go ahead and let you introduce yourself and get things started, and we'll go from there.
Absolutely. Well, so nice to see everybody today virtually. Welcome to our world. For starters, two fun facts to share with you that I want to lead off with is not only am I a special needs financial advisor, but I'm a special needs mom. So, and I have been for 16 years now. So when I share a lot of insights or stories, they come from a lot of personal experience, very near to my own life. And I share it out to be a resource and of help. The second thing, as a financial planner, just as a little disclaimer, I am not a Social Security and Medicaid expert, as it would be like defined by law. So for compliance purposes, I want to be clear about that. That being said, so much of the conversation and the planning work that I do with families is reliant on and revolves around Social Security and Medicaid benefits, preserving, protecting, qualifying, and then building around them. And so I think it's important to have this great discussion today to set the kind of the base foundation of knowledge and understanding of what are they, how do they work, what are some key things. And so I'm excited to be with you guys today to jump into that.
Wonderful. Well, thank you. So let's just jump right in. And why don't you share why Social Security benefits are important?
Absolutely. So I hear from some people quite often that is Social Security worth the rigmarole in terms of the application and the process and the approval, sometimes the denial and then the appeal. I would say it's very normal to get a denial and an appeal. More than 70% of initial applicants get denied right now. So if you're one of those, don't be discouraged, don't be surprised. It's kind of the norm, and it's largely due to the fact that Social Security right now is vastly understaffed. And so it's easy to stamp decline and see who comes back for round two is kind of what I've heard on that front. But Social Security for 2025, the maximum benefit that you can receive is $967 a month. Now, depending on what state you're in watching this, there might be a small state portion for state Social Security benefits. We're in Wisconsin, Janice and I, and so the state portion in Wisconsin is just over $150 a month. So you're talking right around $1,100 a month between the state and the federal portion of Social Security benefits. While that's not a ton of money in terms of supporting an individual independently, it is a sizable sum, and it is the largest, longest benefit that a loved one with a disability or special need is more than likely going to be receiving. When you extrapolate that out over a 20-year period of receiving those benefits, over the lifetime of receiving their benefits from when they're 18 through adulthood of 65, when that would be retirement Social Security benefits kicking in, you are talking over $500,000 in benefits that's going to come out of that over that period of their life. So as caregivers, if we don't have another $500,000 lying around on the money tree outside, which I unfortunately don't, it is a very important benefit to make sure that we get, preserve, and protect. And so that's kind of why I would set the tone and saying, why is this so important? Why do we go after it? Is that foundational piece of planning?
That makes absolute sense, because I don't know a lot of people that have an extra $500,000 laying around. So how do you qualify for Social Security benefits?
So Social Security benefits has two very different definitions of what is disabled, depending on if the individual with the disability is under 18 or over 18. Mm-hmm. If they're over 18, it's a much clearer definition, because is the disability or the qualifying event limiting the ability for employment is defined by very clear numbers. Can they earn more than $900 a month? And is that disability going to be sustained for 6 months or longer? Pretty clear parameters to check a box if someone does or doesn't qualify. When you're under 18, because under 18-year-olds presumably don't work or have an expectation to work, we can't put those same parameters of qualification to it. So now it's really medically diagnosis based. as to whether or not a child would qualify for Social Security benefits. But beyond that, it's also got a financial qualification on both sides, over 18 or under 18. When you are under 18, or the individual with the disability is under 18, in addition to the medical diagnosis qualification, the financial qualification is going to be based on the parent's income plus the parent's asset divided by household member size. And that's going to determine whether or not financially someone is going to qualify for any Social Security benefits when their child is under the age of 18. When their child is over the 18, the financial qualification is now based on the child's assets and income. And so that's why so many families, I'm sure, have heard, right? We can't have more than $2,000 in our child's name when they turn 18, because otherwise they won't qualify for Social Security. Now, there's a few caveats to where you could have more than 2,000 and it won't impact that qualification. The only place you could have more than $2,000 and it wouldn't impact the qualification would be in a 529 plan for college, a 529 ABLE, or in a special needs trust. Those are the only three places that you could have above $2,000 and it wouldn't affect benefit qualification. Anywhere else, if the money is hanging around, they're going to find it, add it together, and if it's over 2,000, they're going to say, oh, great that you meet the medical qualifications, but you don't meet the financial, so sorry, you don't get to receive this benefit just yet. I have heard and seen that oftentimes Social Security might look back as far as 3 years on the finances of an individual. And so that could mean that starting at age 15, you might see them peeking at the finances of record. So I encourage families that I work with from 15 on start to be very mindful of the values that we're holding inside the children's savings accounts, checking accounts, savings bonds, those types of vehicles.
Okay. Yeah, well, that would make sense why a lot of families come to me and say, we've got some money that we need to do something with. I need to open an ABLE account. And so in a case like that, so let's kind of break these three things down, because I think it's important for people to know where to go for those three different things. So let's start with the education one, the 529 account.
Mm-hmm.
Now, from personal experience, and I'm sure that this is going to be more the norm than not, is depending on the age of the dependent. Most cases, they may not know if education beyond high school is even going to be a thing. In more cases than not, I would say it's probably not. So that's typically a higher education, college level. And then they put the money in there and that money would be used for college education. Now, what if they put money in something like that and then find out that their dependent isn't going to go to college? So I think the first question is, what happens if they put money there and find out they're not going to go to college? What happens to that money?
They've got it's a great question. And they have a lot of great options now. And I tell families, don't be scared of that situation whatsoever. The laws have been written now in a way to give us great flexibility and opportunity. The most common options families will take is they'll just transfer the 529 from one child to a different child that may be utilizing that money to go on for further education. If there isn't another child, they could pass it down to even grandchildren, nieces, nephews, if they wanted. More often than not, I tell them you can roll it into an ABLE account without any tax penalties. So now you can take it from the 529 college account, just shift it over to the ABLE account. You have to do it in increments, but you can shift it. Once non-taxable event, no penalties, no nothing. You just move it over, similar to how you would maybe move a 401k if you left an employer. And then once it's in the ABLE account, now you can use those dollars for anything to benefit that individual that has the disability and really free them up.
Absolutely. And so then let's talk about the ABLE account. I get a lot of people that come to me, they don't know where to go. They don't know who to talk to. They're like, well, I found this company online. That kind of scares me. Like, how do you know who to go to? I always encourage people to talk to somebody at a local level, number one. Number two, with an ABLE account, is that just for people with special needs, or is that for people that don't have special needs?
Yeah, good question. So as of this year, in order to use an ABLE account, your disability had to be diagnosed prior to the age of 26. Now, here comes a lot of sixes. Next year, in the year 2026, they are raising that age from 26 to 46 to qualify for an ABLE account. So starting next year, if a disability occurred before the age 46, you can now use an ABLE account. And that change was primarily made with our military and veterans and service men and women in mind, for those who do sustain injuries and now can utilize that vehicle.
Absolutely. That makes sense.
So that piece of it is fantastic. And now I forgot your second question.
Well, where to
go?
Yeah.
Where to go? So I had last week 2 people say, I went to a bank and the bank couldn't help me. I will squash that. No bank will ever be able to help you, because they are not set up by banks. They are actually set up and run by the state that you live in or a neighboring state. There's a few independent plans, American Funds. Some people might recognize that name. They're a big mutual fund company. They have an independent plan you can use, but I encourage most people to set it up with at the state level. The fees and the expenses are going to be significantly less. And the resource that I like to use the most to learn and get to the state's plan is ABLE, ABLE-NRC.org. It stands for ABLE National Resource Center, which is a nonprofit government body that advocates and works with the state, the U.S. government to develop the ABLE accounts and to modify the laws and continue to build on them. And their website has so many great links. You'll get lost forever just in all the great information, but it has a link to each state's site. And so you can go right to your state, click on it. There'll be a link to go right to the state's website, which you know is credible, and you can set it up right there. Generally it takes 15 minutes to set up the account. Super easy once you get rolling.
So would somebody just go directly and do that on their own, or would I direct them to have a conversation with someone like yourself first?
I would say it could be either. I would always encourage people to have a conversation first to make sure that you're deciding the right amounts to put into the ABLE account. Just if we're in Wisconsin, we don't have an ABLE account yet, right? Let's just put that on the table. Is it approved? Yes. Do we have one yet? No. So we have to open them in different states. So sometimes someone like myself can give some good guidance in comparing states and which one you should use and what might be some benefits to one state over another in terms of fees or expenses. How to invest the funds in there can often be a question I receive from families. Should I be aggressive or cash? What should I do? How much? All those kinds of questions can get easily answered in a quick conversation with somebody instead of spending time Googling or researching on your own and then still wondering sometimes if you found the right information.
Right. No, that's true. And then there's that third piece you mentioned, the special needs trust. And I think a lot of people get a little confused, or they're really not sure where to go. And this, I think, is where I would tell people that is not something that a financial advisor handles. That's something that an estate planning attorney handles. Mm-hmm. And that's where someone like us at Morgan's Caring Connection can come into helping support you, make sure that you're talking to an attorney that works with special needs specifically, because although you can work with any estate planning attorney, not all of them are well versed in special needs, and there are specific parameters, rules, that kind of thing that you want to know how to navigate. So I wanted to make sure that when you mentioned all three things, that people don't think they should come to you for a special needs trust, although you do have connections with estate planning attorneys that you can refer them to, but they're two different professions, two different fields that work independently of one another. So I just want to make sure that people know that throughout this conversation, so they know where to go and for what. You talked a little bit about the different types of Social Security benefits. Is there anything around that you feel like somebody might want to know or hear more about?
Yeah, so I'd say there's one big piece that I find most people don't know, and Social Security isn't running to you to tell you. So when our children are 18, they qualify for SSI if they meet those criteria for medical and financial requirements we previously talked about. And that benefit is $967, as I mentioned right now. Let's fast forward and let's presume that the individual with the disability was never able to support themselves in a full-time employment manner and never worked enough to accrue enough Social Security quarters of benefits on their own. Okay. And now mom or dad are at retirement age, and mom and dad are going to go retire. And we'll just pick on I don't know, we'll say mom is 62, dad is still working. Mom is 62. She's like, I think I'm going to take my Social Security check and get that coming into the house. And let's just say mom's Social Security check is, let's say it's $2,500 a month. We'll make up an easy number there. So mom starts to get her Social Security check. It's $2,500 a month. Now the child with the disability could very well be eligible for what we call disabled adult child status, or DAC benefits. And they can forego their $967 a month check, and they are entitled to 50% of whatever mom or dad's retirement check is. So if mom's getting $2,500 a month, child is now eligible for $1,250 a month. So they just got a pay raise.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Mm-hmm. And if and when mom passes, they get bumped to 75% of mom's check. So now child goes to, say, $2,000 a month, and they'll get that the rest of their life. But I'm going to add to that scenario. Let's just say, so mom retired, 62, $2,500 a month. Child is now getting $1,250 a month of benefit. Now dad gets to 70 and says, all right, I'm officially done. I'm taking retirement. And let's say at 70 now, dad worked really hard. And let's say dad's retirement check is $4,000 a month. Well, child with a disability can go to Social Security and say, I love my mom. She's great, but I think I love my dad more. His check's bigger, and I want 50% of his. And so now the child goes from $1,250 to $2,000 a month based on dad's check. Dad passes, and the child went to $3,000 a month based on 75% of dad's check value. That is the disabled adult child. It's a game changer. And along with that, another big thing happens is when you start to claim those DAC benefits, 2 years after you start the disabled child claims, 2 years after that, the child will start to get Medicare benefits for health in addition to Medicaid, which Medicare, as we all know, is a national program. So now that child can move around, travel, get care outside of the state they live in, and have it covered under the Medicare umbrella. And Medicaid will be the secondary payer of last resort, like it was intended to be.
Wow. Game changer.
Game changer. And if you don't know to go to Social Security and knock for that pay bump, they're not coming around saying, hey, we have more money. Do you want it?
And you're leaving money on the table for them.
Absolutely.
Oh, wow, that's crazy. So we talked about being able to get more, but what can cause a reduction in Social Security benefits?
Yeah. So as we talked about in the beginning, if you work too much, right, you will reduce some of your Social Security benefits. That might not be a bad thing, depending on the situation for the individual with the disability and how much they can work. Sometimes it can be. And so sometimes we have to play that game of how much can they work and still get full benefits, because that math is just better math than the in between. Mm-hmm. But the biggest thing that I see is when a child turns 18 and above and they're getting that 967 check, is that I see so many families when I ask them, what is the benefit your child is receiving? Even though I know what the number can be, I always ask, what is your child getting? And I hear so often it is a 600 something number. And when I hear that, my light bulb goes off, because I know 9 times out of 10, the reason that child isn't getting the full 967 is because the parents are not charging that child rent and taking rent money. And if you don't disclose to Social Security that as a parent you're charging them rent and you're taking that money, Social Security is just going to make their own assumption that, oh, well, then your child doesn't need as much, and they're going to reduce that benefit. Mm-hmm. And so that can get pretty easily corrected with a new monthly budget sent to Social Security and some trail history of mom and dad taking a set amount. It should be at least $350 a month off the top from that Social Security check coming in for rent. Now, mom and dad can turn around and put that in the ABLE account for them. Mm-hmm. They could turn around and spend it on the food and the groceries, any number of things, but it's mom and dad's money. But they have to take that rent and disclose to Social Security that the child is paying their share of rent, or they're going to get their benefit reduced.
And this is another one of those things that nobody running around telling you that you can do. We learned purely through experience. And, you know, you can look at it as though it's a negative or a positive. And when I say that, as parents, we didn't look at it as though we were entitled to that. But I'm like, but she's 18. She theoretically, after 18, could be living on her own and paying rent. And she's a dependent still under our roof. Why not be able to use that money to offset other expenses, or like you said, put into an ABLE account where you can put that money aside for future expenses for things? I don't think there's any, they do it, it's not an illegal thing. It's not an unethical thing. And I think a lot of people look at it as though it's not okay to do that. And I think it's so far from the truth, because again, had they not been living with us and on Social Security, they would be off on their own paying somebody else. So I think that it's important for people to understand that, yeah, you can do that and it's okay. It's not unethical or inappropriate to do that. So, okay, so I think we talked a little bit about how you qualify for Medicaid.
Yep, it's very similar to Social Security qualification. Generally, if you get approved for Social Security benefits at 18, Medicaid approval comes right away along with it. They tend to go hand in hand. But similarly, there's that $2,000 asset test for Medicaid to be conscious of. And we want to make sure that we want to qualify for Medicaid, because one of the things about Medicaid, and this applies for folks that might be getting Katie Beckett here in Wisconsin that maybe people don't know, is if you have Medicaid and you go to a facility that agrees to bill Medicaid, by law, that facility cannot come back to you for any portion of unpaid medical expense. They agree to essentially write off anything that's left after Medicaid has paid their share. It's very important for families on Katie Beckett. It preserves their medical out of pocket. And it's even more important when you talk about being over 18, when there isn't enough supplemental income to cover medical expenses to begin with. And so making sure that we maintain that Medicaid qualification is really important. And as long as you got Social Security, the way our system works is they approve them kind of simultaneously in the system.
Okay. And so are there any disadvantages to Medicaid?
Yeah, that's a good one. So the biggest disadvantage is that it only pays in the state that you get it from. And so if you're a family who likes to travel with your child and your child really enjoys traveling, you need to understand and know that if Medicaid is the only health insurance that is there for them and something occurs outside the state that you receive Medicaid from, you are going to be liable there for potentially a lot of medical expenses. And so that often inhibits a lot of families from being able to travel with their loved one or their child, because that risk is just too significant. I know, my daughter is 16, as I said. She's on my health insurance because she's 16, but she has a catastrophic seizure disorder and a plethora of medical complexities that land us in the hospital in the blink of an eye at any minute. And if I don't have my primary insurance that pays out of state benefits, she couldn't travel with us at all if we were strictly reliant on Medicaid. That risk, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars that could end up being if something happened when we were out of state, or you're scrambling to figure out how to get an unwell child back home just for medical care, neither of which would be ideal. So understanding that piece of the Medicaid component, especially at 26, when children fall off their parents' health insurance, and that's usually when they're just left with Medicaid. That's when that risk really tends to present itself, as 26 and beyond, until we switch those Social Security benefits and get Medicare on board with it, and then we're covered again.
Hey, I'm going to bring up one thing, talking about that magical 26 age. I'm going to bring up one thing, and that is and this is total different direction, life insurance. When parents add life insurance for a child rider, or like through work, 26 is that magical age in most cases where the life insurance piece falls off. And so I think that that's something, again, if people are looking at age limits for things, this is one of those things. Again, you want to make sure you have a plan in place, because if that's their only insurance, so our daughter Morgan was uninsurable at birth. However, my wife did have, believe it or not, a very small child policy through work that we were able to get because there's no underwriting. It wasn't a lot, but she passed at 25. Had she passed at 26, there would have been absolutely nothing. So again, this is where those things kind of tie in. And I'm sure we could talk about life insurance, and I'm sure we'll have another segment around that. But I think that it's really important for families to understand ages, like certain things happen at certain ages. At 18, it's very pivotal for a lot of things. 26 is another benchmark that's very pivotal. It looks like 46 is going to yet be another one. And so I think it's really important for parents, caregivers, people that are taking care of dependents, to understand these ages and have plans in place for those specific ages to make sure that, if they don't have coverage or know they're going to lose it, are there other options? And that's another one that, again, I think we do cover in another video, and that is, what do you do when your child is uninsurable for life insurance? We do a video on that as well, because there are options and we didn't know it. And nobody said anything to us until after Morgan was gone. And so it would have been nice to have something put away versus nothing. And so again, this goes back time and time and time again, why it's so important to do estate planning. And financial planning is a part of estate planning. It's just one of the components that solidifies and makes everything holistic and all at once. And so again, I don't mean to go sideways on this.
I love it.
I cannot stress all this enough, again, from personal experience. And I hope nobody else has the same experience that we had. But there are things that come up that we're not prepared for. And so to educate ourselves wherever we can, I think, is so critical. And so I guess the last thing would be, is there a difference between Medicaid and Medicare that specifically you want to call out?
I would just say, kind of rounding out the conversation that we've already had, is just know that Medicare is a federal benefit. And so it covers you wherever you go across the state, across the country. Little different parameters, right, to things, but Medicare is a national program, therefore covers you nationally. Medicaid is a state program, therefore just covers you in your state. And certain providers can opt out of Medicaid, where you can't opt out of Medicare being a provider.
Okay, well, I think that this has been very educational. Love it. Thank you. Is there anything else that you think that I might have forgot to ask about, or anything?
No, I think we hit the main points. Now, there's always going to be one-offs. There's always going to be some little nuances, right? In the letter of the law, as it relates to Social Security and things, it's a book and a half, right? But this hopefully was enough to get everybody started, paint a nice big picture for everybody, give them those timeline things to get on their radar so that they have an idea when they're popping up. Absolutely.
Well, and as we all know, revisit frequently, because things change all the time. So that's my one big piece of advice. It's keep revisiting things on a very regular basis, and hopefully you are working with a financial advisor, because that's what you do for your profession. So you know what's going on when it's happening, and it's hard to keep up with everything all the time. So thank you very much for your time today. I really appreciate it. Again, this is Janice with Morgan's Caring Connection with Melissa Burback from Northwestern Mutual. If anybody has any questions, you can reach out to us directly. And we hope you all have a wonderful day and get a lot of education out of this video.